Gurma agut ta áthasar man deise áil chun lórtear an mille seo aniu agus na faibanna a bhaineann leis a chur in uail. Whether this bill turns out to be significant in the good or the bad sense is another thing, but one thing is clear. The powers that this bill will confer on the LDA are enormous. The regulation of relevant public land to develop and regenerate the delivery of housing and to develop and manage housing on that and other land. To enable the agency to provide services to local authorities in order to assist them in the performance of their functions relating to housing. To provide for acquisition of the agency of relevant public land, including by means of granting its first refusal on a proposed sale, and to provide for the compulsory purchase of the land by the agency. Each of those issues on their own could easily absorb an entire day's debate here in this chamber. The constitutional issues alone, with respect to the compulsory purchase order, will raise significant concerns, especially in rural Ireland. I raised these concerns last April when the previous government's proposal of implementing compulsory purchase orders, CPOs, for agricultural land became clear. I said at that time that if it was introduced, it would certainly undermine and endanger any efforts at maintaining financial viability through farm expansion, and I also called it a land grab. Indeed, we know that these concerns were amplified by additional reports that the CPO proposals will seek to implement a key recommendation from the Kenny Report 1973, which states that it should be possible for local authorities or government agencies to CPO farmland for house building by paying the landowner agricultural value plus a 25% top-up. But this is disingenuous. To make the claim that farmland is property like any other, and that it must be subjected to the restriction of constitutional property rights, which are currently allowed in law. This is to totally ignore the plain reality that farms and farmlands are, in the vast majority of cases, also homes, which enjoy additional constitutional levels of protection. The Minister may recall the suggestion from the Master of the High Court, Edmund Honohan, back in 2016, where he recommended that the state use of CPOs to buy back residential properties were sold to vulture funds. At that time, Mr Honohan pointed out that legislation could be introduced so that the properties could be purchased for the same price that they were sold. I do not recall any legislative rush to limit the rights of vulture funds, equivalent to that which has been speculated now about farmland. The rights, indeed the birthrights that farmers enjoy to maintain control of their land, must not become collateral damage in the race towards this government's creation of a new land agency. And I won't be supporting the bill because I have serious concerns. I also want to say that I feel local authorities should be giving a lot more powers and a lot more funding, because they are doing great work. There is also the issue of one-off rural housing. What powers will the LDA have with respect to this matter? Rural housing is a massive issue. This government and the government before it talked about depopulation in rural communities. Is it any wonder we have depopulation when people cannot build houses on their own land? And I feel that this must be addressed by government, because rural Ireland again is suffering ongoing discrimination and being impacted negatively. I feel that people should have the absolute right to build a house on their own land and remain within their own community and their own parish. And I would hope that this government would have the goodwill to try and resolve this ongoing matter, which is causing huge distress for rural families. As far back as June 2019, I was calling on the Minister for Housing, Minister Owen Murphy at the time, to provide an immediate timeline for the publication of the new rural planning guidelines. We know that a working group was established to review and, where necessary, recommended changes to the 2005 planning guidelines on sustainable rural housing, and I hope that these guidelines will be published, and indeed that they will be fair to rural families who are being discriminated against in terms of one-off housing.